Hey everybody, Tim Kulig from the Tim Kulig Free Music Podcast. Welcome back. Today, I have none other than Kelly Clark from over at Dork Tales. Welcome, Kelly.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me over. Good to see everybody. Well, not see everybody, but you get what I mean.
Absolutely. So yeah, man, I wanted to do this, honestly, because I freaking love your channel.
Thank you.
And I think what you're doing for the DM space, for the RPG space, is beyond amazing. It's beyond amazing because I see people put things up on YouTube. Now I know you broadcast to Twitch first, right? And YouTube's like 48 hours later. But I see people do this kind of content in this space, and they do one campaign. You do several at a time. I have no idea how you pack this all in. My first biggest question for you is, how did you even get started? What was the catalyst, man?
To which part? To like DMing in general?
Yeah, just the whole universe. Like, what got you into it in the beginning? And how long ago was it?
So it all begins in 1983. No, so I was a mostly only child from an army brat family. So my dad was military. We lived overseas most of my early life. So pretty much I spent my early years doing a lot of talking to myself and a lot of like just playing with action figures and just kind of creating everything. So the idea of doing like interactive storytelling really sank in at an early age. And when I found out about D&D in the 90s, I really wanted to get into it, but I lived in the middle of Missouri. I bought a copy of Encyclopedia Magica, which was like one of the old spell books from like second ed, and tried to figure it out because it was the only D&D product I could find within like 100 miles of where I grew up.
Oh, wow.
Couldn't figure it out. Eventually had a friend who ran a one-shot Vampire the Masquerade session over the phone for me when I was 16. And I actually didn't get into role-playing proper until I was in college. And then I met a bunch of nerds, and one of them introduced me to Shadowrun, and then Mage the Ascension, which is a World of Darkness game that is my baby. I think it's one of the, if not the greatest role-playing game that's ever been made. And then I took it from there. I ran a ton of games throughout my college years. Then I stayed in college way too long.
Yeah, me too. I was a 12-year guy.
Oh, hey, me too.
Nice.
And then I went,
high five
from my and then I went back for my master's later, which was ridiculous.
Yeah, me too. I took a year off and did the same thing. I took a year off, went back for 4 years and finished that up. But it was a long journey, man.
It was, yeah. I have way too many degrees. I have like a pyramid of them. I have 3 bachelor's degrees or something like that. Like do I have 3 or 4? I don't remember. I got one by accident. I got one because I was taking enough side cut. So, okay. I came up to Canada for university after my first year down at Missouri Southern. And I wanted to get into the writing program here. But the writing program here is so staggered that you basically have to spin your wheels taking a second degree while you're waiting for spots to open up in these little workshops. Okay. So I accidentally got an extra degree out of it because I was like, 3 classes shy of getting a second piece of paper. So I was like, all right, fine.
Yeah, why not?
Right. So that's why I have a classics degree, which is hilarious, especially with all the talk of Roman stuff these days. Let's not get into that.
So tell me, those first 2 degrees were in what? They're in creative writing, or are they in?
So I have one in writing for stage and screen, with basically is also a fiction degree because I took them both up to the top level, but you only get the words on one paper. And then I have a degree in Greek and Roman studies, which is basically classics. Then I have a degree in American history and a master's in public history. So public history is kind of like. Yeah, it's good. So public history is presentational history. So it's not like academic history. It's how do you show history to the public? Museums, art pieces, historical fiction, which is really helpful when I'm running historical fantasy games. I
was going to say that lends itself to all the campaigns that you do for sure.
Pretty helpful.
Yeah,
it's pretty helpful. And one of the big things that we studied in there is that vibe is more important than fact when you're communicating to the public,
right?
Like it's you are going to spin your wheels forever if you're trying to be 100% accurate. Whereas if so long as you get the vibe across, like people are still learning and engaging in history, which is more
Mhm.
important overall. You
Yeah.
want to kind of instill that passion in them.
But give me an
So
example of vibe over. Give me an
yeah, please.
example of that. A vibe over.
Hamilton.
Okay.
Hamilton. Like you're
Yeah.
getting the vibe of the era, but you're also moving in all of these elements from modern day. And most of what you're doing is really encouraging people to seek out history on their own. Gangs of New York is a really good
Hmm.
example as well, uh, because Daniel Day-Lewis does an amazing job of copying the accent from the era. But moreover, like that's not historically valid, but it feels like a snapshot that could have happened, right?
Right. Right.
And that's what you want. There Will Be Blood, another great example. Anything with Daniel Day-Lewis, basically,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
would
He's
be great.
phenomenal.
He's amazing.
And there's a bunch of those that I haven't, believe it or not, when I was a
Yeah.
video store rat in the 90s and
Oh,
early
you? No.
2000s. And there's a
Basically,
couple of
everybody
those.
I like worked in a video store. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mourn the
You a
death of
Blockbuster
all
guy?
that. No, actually, I had two good friends that had a privately owned chain of 4 or 5 stores in
Oh,
Connecticut.
that's cool.
And so it was mom and pop, but it was a little bigger than that. They kind of
Mm,
had they had their own logo and theme and everything
mm,
across these different locations. And our thing was we were the counter to that. We were counter to the
yeah.
Blockbuster chain because Blockbuster was like, oh, that's a whole different. That's a whole rabbit hole if you want to go down that. But it was a challenge because they had at that time, like the late 90s, early 2000s, they had deals with the studios and they would get like an uncanny amount of copies
Oh, yeah.
of new
Oh, yeah.
releases. And
No, I
they didn't
remember.
pay for any of them. They didn't pay for any of them. They just split revenue with the studios.
I knew that part.
Yeah.
I knew that there would be like 50 copies of The Phantom Menace when it came out and things like
Yeah.
that. But like,
Yeah. I mean, they're literally provided with this. They split revenue with the studios. And a location like my buddy's location, they'd have to buy all those copies. Now, if they're sell through, which is
mm,
what you'd buy in that, you know, uh, at Borders Books and Music, if you remember
yeah.
that, and Walmart or anything like that, or Target, they're like in the $20 range, right?
Mm,
But if we're talking VHS tapes,
yep.
the non-sell through ones were like 60 to 70 bucks a piece.
You know what? I honestly remember that because
Yeah.
I started getting into like anime really hardcore back in the early 90s when I was like,
Hmm.
I don't know, like 12.
Yeah.
And the only way you could get it was either by getting bootlegs or by buying it from video stores. And I remember when they would be like, "Oh, it's like, 40 to 80 bucks for a copy of like a 30-minute VHS tape of like Ranma One Half."
Yeah.
I guess it'd be a
It's
60-minute, but yeah. It
But
was
you think about
ridiculous.
$3 a rental, that's 20 plus turnovers before you break even.
Yeah,
That
which is
sucks.
yeah, especially
You
for
know?
like indie movies. Like if you're trying to be
Yeah.
counterculture, that so were you a Randall? Was that
I was a Randall. I wasn't so obtuse and I was actually much more kind to my
okay. All right.
my
For
clientele.
those listeners, that's a Clerks reference, the Kevin Smith movie Clerks,
Yeah.
and potentially Clerks. They did a Clerks 3, and I don't know if anybody watched it.
Yeah. I didn't watch 2 or 3 to be honest. There's sometimes with those sequels I get weird about sequels like you're trying to hit comic gold again and I'm like, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. I don't know.
Well, and Clerks was a self-contained moment. It didn't really need a sequel because all of the sequels for Clerks, as far as I know, are always these guys are back and they're still really depressed. In fact, they're even more depressed.
Yeah. And that's not real life at all. They all just skyrocketed, you know? I mean, well maybe they are,
Yeah.
but
I mean, maybe. I mean, if
Yeah.
I guess if I was still working at the Quick Stop or I think it was Quick Stop,
yeah.
I after like 30 years, I'd probably be pretty depressed. But like, I don't know.
I mean,
Eh.
yeah, I mean if you love what you do, it's
Oh
it's
well, I mean, we know that's not the case with Dante, but like, yeah.
no. No.
So how I got into it. So I started running a ton of live action games. I got really big into like parlor LARPs and stuff like that because I'm a
Mm.
theater nerd. And when I finally graduated, I started listening to this podcast called Friends at the Table.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And then but there people are doing this like for a living. And one of the things with my games is that I love them, and you have all of these amazing stories afterwards, but they're kind of just war stories with you and your friends. And I kind of wanted to share that. I always wanted to
Mm,
have something that was like a record of my time, because you spend so much time on stuff that, I would keep like stacks of notebooks, and that's pretty much the only archive. So seeing
right.
people share their stuff around and potentially do it as a job, I was like, oh, we should totally do this.
Yeah, I
And
know
I
a
kept,
few. I know a few DMs that like they spend hours and hours and hours
mm,
with prep work, and I know there's rabbit holes that you create because you're hoping the party goes
mm,
in this direction. And of course, as the DM, you can finagle that any way you want,
yeah, oh,
right?
totally.
However, sometimes the story and the actions of your characters don't lend themselves to getting in that direction, and you may never visit that again in that
Yep.
campaign. And sometimes you've spent hours anticipating this, and they don't come anywhere near it, and it doesn't make sense to try to shoehorn it in, right? And it's like, oh my God, I did all
Absolutely.
that prep work. Like, how do you feel about that when that comes up? You're like, damn it, I did all that
Um,
work, and
I mean, it kills me when it happens, but I think you can save it. You can reuse a lot of it. I like to be really flexible. I have this. Okay, this is going to be the most heretical thing I say. I could say pretty much anything else the rest of this podcast, and nobody would care after this.
Mhm.
I have a bunch of comments recently on like some big fight that I had in one of my homebrew games, and people were like, "Whoa, I really want to see that guy's stats." And I'm like, I don't even remember if I wrote them down. Like I think I did, but uh, I grew up. Well, I grew up into a dungeon master from being a game master and a storyteller in other systems where having hard and fast mechanics weren't as big of a deal. Like you
Right.
don't need if you're running a Vampire the Masquerade game, you don't need every power that a vampire elder has. You can kind of assume that, yeah, they probably have that. And so long as you're fair and
Mhm.
consistent. So if you use it, you're like, okay, he has that one, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, and so long as you don't use it to abuse the narrative and the characters and just use it to, I mean, I think that so long as you stay away from the antagonistic dungeon master approach,
Right.
you can do whatever you want. That's a very blanket term, but I'm like, I don't even remember what his stats are. I don't remember what I did. I don't know if I have them. I think I wrote them down. I think I had something prepped for that because it was a big ass fight.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't know. So I like to keep much more freeform.
Yeah.
And so there are times where I prep something and the characters completely left turn me, and I'm like, well, crap. I don't know what I'm gonna do at this point. But I think overall, I lean into organics and say, like, okay, well, what do you think your character would do? Like, what do you, and then you just kind of, sometimes you have to spin your wheels and have a guy that sounds like Christopher Walken show up and be like, "Hey, so I heard you're looking for a wizard." Like I happen to be a wizard. You know,
It's fantastic.
you
So
know.
that must, I mean, evolution wise, that may
Mm,
be a reason that, I mean, this is my one of my next questions. Like
mm.
the fact that you're doing this online must change it a little bit.
Oh yeah,
Like if
yeah.
you're just doing this at home, you're entertaining each other together. There's
Mm,
a lot of things that can be said not verbally that they're inside jokes. You all get it. You're friends,
mm.
right? What's the difference between doing this online versus at home so that you can convey those things to the audience? Do they have to be verbalized? Like how does that work?
I I think a lot of it's familiarity with the camera. So at first it
Hmm.
was kind of awkward because even if you have a really fast internet connection, there is still quarter to a half second delay on things. So a lot of
Hmm.
micro expressions, a lot of micro pauses. You have to practice, and you really have to get a sense of the tempo of conversation so that you don't talk over each other.
Right.
You get a lot more used to like doing nonverbal gestures when you're about to speak. So like, for example, it could be simple as like having a hand raised or leaning in a bit more and then everybody's paying attention. Saying something in a private chat that says, "Hey, I'm about to do a rant," or something like that.
Gotcha.
So you get a little more used to communicating through those ways. But after a while, you get really used to it. And it's really, it's I don't know, man. It's so much cooler in some ways. Like I love being in person, but doing it online, for one, having the audience there is a hell of a lot of fun. Like having a live chat, reacting, and
Yeah. Well, that's what you
there.
get with Twitch, right?
Oh yeah, that's one
Yeah.
of the reasons we do it is that it's fun to have the chat there, and there's just this. It's got a live performance vibe to it. I mean, it is a live performance, but like it has the vibe of being on stage almost,
Right.
but from
Right.
the comfort of your own home. Things that are way better. Well, things that are way worse about doing it online is that you have to deal with tech. So there's always
Hmm.
tech issues. Someone's always got a bad internet connection. That I mean, you get the millisecond delay. You sometimes, if you have a chat, you're going to get trolls sometimes. It's
Hmm.
just a thing.
Yeah.
And you do have to get over the anxiety of performing on camera because a lot of people aren't comfortable with that either because of how they see themselves physically, how they just are shy people. And it's a
Right.
really
Right.
good, but I think us moving through the pandemic really helped with that because people got so used to Zoom calls,
Right.
right? Like, I mean, that's literally what we're doing right now. This is a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think you just need to be comfortable in your own skin and realize, honestly, for lack of a better, nobody gives a
hmm,
shit, right?
nobody
Like
give, well, and
they're
the people
there
who
for
do give a shit aren't worth your time.
yeah, yeah, but they're there for the experience. You're
Mhm.
not going to be 100% of the time. It's just not going to happen. You're going to forget your place. You're going to
Yeah,
have an awkward connection. Like if you ever had an awkward connection with one of the characters and work that into the story and kind of
sometimes,
twisted that
yeah,
around.
like
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes absolutely. We have one player that suffers from. We have a couple of players actually that do this because we're nerds. It's weird. We have health issues sometimes. We have some players with chronic health issues that might have to duck out of game midway through because of like some pain or something like that.
Hmm.
And sometimes characters are just really squirrely because of that. It's like, well, where did Ava go? Yep, that's what they do. They just vanish sometimes into space, and it's really frustrating because we really could use our cleric right now,
Right.
but they're off communing with their god. So I mean, you kind of have to do that.
Right.
Um, I guess other downsides of the playing online is that you do get people who get really, really weird about dice rolls. The number of comments I have because I have my partner is particularly lucky when it comes to dice rolls. Now, this is in person, this is online. They're not going to lie about this. Like, if you think your player is lying to you about dice rolls, you probably shouldn't play with them
Right.
because you've already broken that trust with yourself. Um, I mean, sometimes it happens though. So,
Well, that's why some people relegate all that to like roll 20 or something. Like you have
yeah,
to roll on the platform because this ensures accountability, right?
some
Like
people
that's
I've had people demand that in my YouTube comments. Oh, I want visual dice, or they want like a camera on everybody's dice. I'm like, I'm not paying $100 per player for a webcam that I then have to light and set up. And a lot of graphics cards can't handle multiple cameras, first of all. So
yeah.
like, I don't know, like you're not even on my Patreon, man. Go away.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna
Like,
say, secondly, this is free content unless you're paying for the Patreon. So guess what?
oh, if you're on the Patreon, ask how you like. Let me ask how you want your eggs. Like, I will do anything for my patrons, but like, it's these randos online who are like, "Oh, your content sucks. By the way, I won't watch because you don't have a dice cam and this player's cheating." I'm like, they're not cheating. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, what? I guess, but like, I'm not gonna. So you get a lot of people who are very demanding. They want very specific things, and that can be very frustrating. But you also get some of the sweetest people in the world, and that is
Right.
honestly who we see the most of. The best parts about doing it online, it is much easier to schedule games. I have never had this last year has been kind of rough because there's been a lot of illness. One of us had a kid.
Mhm.
Like I just got a new dog, so there's been a lot of games that have been like, okay, we're having to reschedule this, we're having to reschedule that. But historically, it has never been so easy to plan sessions as we do this every Monday because there is that the expectation that you're going to be in front of an audience. Like there's a
Yeah.
show
Yeah.
and they show up for that. Whereas before it'd be like, oh, I'm not feeling it, guys. And it's like, well, we're going on stage
Yeah.
and
People are expecting us. Yeah.
exactly, right? And that
Yeah.
pressure is really handy. But the number one greatest thing about doing this over Zoom or over Ping or however you use it is everybody gets their own bathroom
Yeah.
during the
That's
break.
right.
Oh my God. We used to do it in my living room for Dork Tales, like the first year, and the bathroom breaks were the like awful because
Well, you got
everybody
like
would
a half an
climb up.
hour and half an hour later, right? And then
Oh yeah.
you lose the momentum, right? Like you're probably gearing up to
Mhm.
a certain spot and you want to take a break, but
Yep.
I know what a half an hour can do to live action
Oh yeah.
anything, you know? It
Oh yeah.
just kills the mood. It kills the energy, kills the vibe. It's a completely different vibe when you come back and start the record button again,
Oh,
right?
well, no, we would be live at the time too, so it would be a rush to try to do it before our like we try to keep our breaks to 5 to 10 minutes max in the middle of the game,
Oh
right?
God, that's right. That I just yeah.
So
So
and then when we started introducing costume, then it was, oh, I've got to fix my costume, I've got to fix my makeup, I've got to do this. Well, I have to pee, so either thankfully we're all theater nerds, so it was like, okay, well, I'm getting changed. You can see it or not, your call.
yeah.
But I mean that's oh, and sorry, I said that was the best thing. The absolute best thing is that nobody has to wear pants.
Yeah,
I
you
I
can literally do it in your PJs. Like
I
doesn't matter. Yeah.
I have so many pairs of joggers now.
Yeah.
Like I'm wearing joggers right now and a pair of
Yeah.
Spider-Man slippers.
Yeah.
Like
Well, it is 9:30 in the morning, right? I don't
right,
yeah.
like it's like
Those
this
are
is my
awesome.
work uniform, man. Like
It's
I
fantastic.
love that. So yeah, and as for the original question, so Dork Tales was just kind of something we were doing for fun after a while. Like we got into it because one of my friends was participating in the Extra Life charity.
Okay.
And I was like, I should run some games for that because, like, well, we won't play video games, we'll play tabletop games. And it was my excuse to finally kick my ass into like starting a channel. And then
Hmm.
we just kept going from there. And when the pandemic hit, I had just had two contracts that I was on end right before the pandemic in they ended in January.
Hmm.
And I was like, I have not taken a holiday since my second year of university. So like 12 years. I hadn't taken like anything more than a couple weeks off. So I'm like,
Hmm.
I have a bunch of money saved up. I'm gonna take 2 months to just job hunt casually. I'm on EI, which is unemployment, right? So
Yep.
I'm gonna work while I'm on unemployment because I put into this. I might as well get a little bit back. And then I'll hop back into it. And then the pandemic hit.
That must have been that must have been the well, outside of the pandemic, it must have been the most restful 2 months you've ever had in your life. Like you
It
don't like
was
it
it
takes
was
a few
pretty
weeks,
okay.
right? It takes a few weeks to like unwind that like gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, gotta like
Well, and then I actually scored a job. I scored a gig in February that was getting geared up as a historical reenactor at a lighthouse.
oh wow.
So I had to go in, do a bunch of interviews. I had to make they gave it was really cool. They had a bunch of props out on a table. This is for like a provincial park. And you had to pick an item off of the table and give a lecture about it.
Without having any idea. Or
No
just
prep. You just
off the snuff,
off
off
the
the
spot.
cuff.
I mean, this is my kind of thing, right? So it was
Yeah.
great.
Well,
It got
given
to the point where
your history background, I would say, dude,
oh yeah,
you nailed it.
it
You
was
must have nailed it.
it was so much fun, and I got to the point where I was being fitted for the outfit, and then the pandemic hit, and it was like, oh, we're gonna put you on processing like unemployment claims, and then I just never heard back because all the parks closed for a year,
Oh
so the
wow.
entire parks department closed down, and so I had nothing else to do, and after a few months of that, I was going insane, like just looking for work, spinning my wheels, running like 2 games a week, and I'm like, maybe I should do this. Like,
Yeah.
and it became my job.
Yeah.
That's what I do for a living right now. I got a
That's
part-time
so
little gig
amazing.
on the side doing some editing, but this is what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can do what you love and it pays the bills
Mm,
and maybe a little bit more and you get a little bit ahead, that's all you can ask for, right? Like that's
yeah.
pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Because listen, I don't want to I don't want to sugarcoat it. Work is
Yeah.
always work, right?
Oh yeah.
Like even making music and doing a podcast and everything else, like it's reps. You know, you get in, you
Oh,
have
yeah.
to do reps. You have to come in. You have to show up and do the work. And sometimes it's a grind, but
100%.
ultimately, when it's for you and it's not somebody else's agenda and somebody else's needs and wants, and more importantly, like other pile of money, and you get some pittance, now I feel
Yep.
like I'm speaking in language because I'm seeing your background. I'm like starting to fall into some medieval. It's a pittance for what I'm
Fair,
doing,
fair.
you know.
Yeah, I'm just hanging out in a tavern. I can change this to a different one if you
No,
want. We
it's
can go
fine.
modern. I couldn't find the background I normally use, which is like really fancy condo that I use. I'm like, oh, this is where I work. No, it's not where I work from. I work from like a basement suite. But like, my office is the living room usually. So I've been working off the same folding table for 4 years.
Have you always incorporated homebrew into your campaigns, or is that
Yeah.
something new that you've delved into? And
So we originally started doing homebrew.
Mhm.
That was the majority of what we did, and it wasn't until like 2020 when the Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons pre-written adventure, so like a book of adventures for those who don't know D&D.
Mhm.
There was like
Like
one long
Fan
form
Delver's one of
adventure.
those, right?
Exactly, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So a book called Rime of the Frost Maiden came out, and I was like, okay, when this comes out, why don't we run this? We'll run it like day one, and we'll costume it. We'll because we're LARPers and theater nerds. Like, let's actually do costuming for a change.
Hmm.
And that started this trend where whenever a new book would come out for Wizards of the Coast, we would run it. We would be the first people to run it when it became publicly available. We would run it to conclusion. We would put our all into it. And that's really helped the channel take off, is that people got these books and they wanted to see how other people ran them. So they would
Mm.
watch us, and then they share those with their friends, and then we on quite a few of those books are the preeminent YouTube channels or YouTube channel for
Mm.
those books. Like I
Yeah.
think one of them are Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Our first episode has now these numbers are not Markiplier numbers, but in the tabletop space, the first episode has like 55,000 views, which
It's not nothing.
that's not
That's
nothing.
yeah, that's
I mean,
that's
it's not a
that's
makeup
nice.
tutorial, but like it's
Yeah.
not TikTok numbers, but like
Yeah.
in the tabletop space, I go around and I've got a friend who's been trying to break into video game live streaming for 10 years. And he
Mm.
does it almost every day. And I look at his views and they're like one or two views per video. And I
What's he playing? Is he playing obscure stuff? Is he
obscure
like
stuff.
yeah.
He's just I don't think he knows how to market himself.
Okay. I
And
think
we've
with
kind of
that consistency, eventually the
you
algorithm
would
will pick
think.
him up and
You,
suggest him, right?
yeah.
Um,
Well, but I every time I see him grinding along, I just am like, like, I mean, I best I can do is throw some views. Like, we don't really talk anymore. It's just life
yeah,
stuff. But it's it makes and looking at other people in the tabletop space, I see how hard it is for other people to get traction, and I feel really lucky.
yeah, yeah. Well,
I
you
mean,
you clearly engage your audience, so that's a
I
huge
bust my ass.
yeah, that's a
Like,
huge part of it, right? That
yeah,
literally, responding to comments, responding to
yeah,
people on Patreon, encouraging people to give you
100%.
feedback, all those things. I think the more people feel involved with the show and
Mhm.
involved with the characters in the show and ultimately the production in general,
Yeah.
they're going to want to stick around. They're going to want to see you succeed. So they're going to download the show. They're going to watch it. They're going to stream it
Mhm.
in the background even if they're not watching the characters, like they're going to support you any way they can. And I think
Yeah,
that's
and
super important. Your show has to speak to the audience that you've gathered, right?
yeah, 100%. And like you have to market yourself. You have to find that like middle ground between saying that you're the greatest thing ever and also knowing you're not. You have to
Hmm.
be humble, but you also have to be like, hey, we're trying really hard. We're doing the best we can. Um, Please come help us. Please come watch this. You have to, if you don't do calls to action, nothing happens. And it was really
Right.
funny. Like one of my editors for some of these role-playing books I work on the side, once called me the master of self-promotion. And I'm like, I don't, I'm not a business guy. I just go, hey, come read my book
Yeah.
because I wrote it. And I'm like, what's the opposite of that? Like, just don't read my book. I mean, like, you just hide. You're like, oh yeah, I might have written a book. No, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Be proud of what you made, right?
be
And be like,
proud.
hey,
Don't.
if you like this content, you might like this. So why check it out and let me know what you
Yeah,
think, right? Like
yeah,
I feel like a great call to action is a soft ask on top of some other value you've already given away for free,
yeah.
right?
Well, that's
Um,
that's why. Yeah. Well, Dork Tales stuff, like a lot of tabletop game groups have like paywalled stuff. The
Mhm.
only thing behind our Patreon paywall is we have a behind the scenes podcast we do once a month. I sit down and I have one of these basically with somebody.
Yeah.
That's the only thing the Patreon gets. They get some like early content, and
Hmm.
we have some shows that go on Patreon like 3 to 4 months early, but then they go
Yeah.
public because I like I was in school for 12 years. I've been broke.
Yeah.
I get it, and I watch YouTube constantly. I don't have the money to pay for every Patreon of every creator I watch,
Hmm.
so I get that not everybody can pay for like Dork Tale stuff.
Right.
You know, I think that information and entertainment should be free. I also think that people should be able to live comfortably while they're making it. But you know, if you can't afford it, I'm going to give it to you anyway. You
Right.
know, maybe
Right.
maybe someday you can.
Right. Oh, that's always been my philosophy with the music because it's
Oh,
like
100%.
I need to offer the value first, and down the road I know because I just know the patterns of other royalty-free musicians that came before me that
Hmm.
lo- remove the paywall and people will use it all over the place, and
Oh
then
yeah.
they
I use your
ultimately
stuff all the time.
yeah well ultimately
That's how we met, right? Is
that's correct
I
that's
found
correct
what was the first one? Here There Be Dragons, I believe
yeah
was the first one I used for Dragonlance. And I
yeah
was like, oh, this is a banger.
oh thanks man
Oh, hell. Oh, just the, I don't know what that horn is that you have there. The boom, boom.
oh
Oh,
that
man.
was
Just,
like a oh what patch is that? It's not even a native instruments patch. It's like a
is it not?
no, it's not a Heaviosity or native instruments. It's like a third party. Um, oh goodness, what is the I don't
It's
know, at this
dope as
point
hell.
I
Like, it's
really
so
should go
good.
back.
But, so, I mean, that's how we met is that, like, I had watched other people start putting like trailers out for their games. And I
Yeah.
was watching, and I'm like, I come from an anime background, really, like an anime music video background and all that. And I'm like, okay, bet I can do this too. Let's see what I can do. So I
Yeah.
started making opening sequences for a lot of my games that are like, hey, this needs to be like 1 minute ish. And it needs to like grab you by the hair and be like, hey, watch this thing. It's really cool. By the way,
Right.
how cool is it to be a player in a game and have your name in the opening credits? Like, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Totally. Totally. I see that opening montage to all that like obviously I've seen uh Philander am I
Fandel?
Fandelver.
It's a weird. I didn't come up with it. It's one of
Um
their.
oh is that their opening? Or is that
No. I mean the
oh,
name Fandelver.
oh yeah.
I
But
didn't come
that
up with it.
opening
So.
like it does the screenshots of everybody and gives
Yeah.
you a quick glimpse at what's to come. Like
I
that's
mean,
that's freaking
Only
cool.
Teeth Remain is a really good song. Like it's like I have found a lot of great stuff from like your work. I'm really excited to be using quite a bit of it in some future games. I've been using the hell out of Recluse and Obfuscate recently. Like those
Oh,
tracks
okay.
work for almost every game.
Okay.
Like it's right. Like I'm like, oh, let's throw some Obfuscate in here. Let's you know, because I like to have
Yeah, just
music playing during the games, right? So
to anybody that doesn't know what he's referencing, that's off of a Cyberpunk album, which isn't necessarily RPG slash D&D, but I never know what people are going to use it for,
it works
right?
for D&D
Yeah.
because it's not like there's a level of like kind of techno vibe that you have. Like there's a threshold where it's like, oh, too much, but it's
Hmm.
like, okay, that could be a synth, but it might not be, right?
Right.
And I'm like,
Right.
I put that in a fantasy game.
Oh,
You
when
have
I
to have an
drop in atonal instruments, yeah. Yeah, like the
oh
atonal
man. Oh,
instrumentation is
we
fun to do.
have you're gonna like this. So we have a new game that's coming out on our Patreon. It's a Mage the Ascension game, and
Hmm.
it's set in the 1920s. A basic premise for it is I was like, I really love Mage the Ascension. I really love historic games. Man, I really like fedoras. I feel like, man, Call of Cthulhu is really cool. I wish it wasn't like, I wish H.P. Lovecraft wasn't a racist dirtbag, you
Yeah.
know? Hey, wait, I can run Call of Cthulhu without Call of Cthulhu. And that was kind of the idea.
Yeah.
And I was looking through some tracks you sent me, and the name of the game actually changed to fit one of the like we renamed it our chronicle after one of your tracks. So
Oh,
it's now
really?
actually called Bedlam.
Oh, nice.
Because I was just like, oh, this because I was like, oh, this is the opening theme. And I've massaged it a bit to make it shorter. I'll send you and see if you like the shortened version, want to like see
Oh,
if you want
sure.
to do it. But like
I
'Cause
can
I'm like, oh, it
extend
has-
that song too. Like when I released that track, I it's it's only two parts, right? It's basically a middle section sandwich with the
Mhm.
two bedlamy, I consider them, parts
Yeah,
that
I
like
can see that.
it fades out to that or whatever. But I always felt like that entire track sounded like it could do more. It could do more work. And maybe
I would love a longer or loopable version of that for the creepier moments. So
okay.
I managed to cut the song down to like I think it's like 55 to 60 seconds.
Hmm.
So that it kind of fits an opening credit montage. Because I'm like, I've got this idea, kind of like, did you ever watch The Haunting on Hill House?
Bits and pieces of it.
So kind of like the
Not the
opening
whole thing.
credits with like the fade-ins and like
Okay.
creepy vibes to it. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh, I
yeah.
want this. And I always am so worried that like when I take like an axe to somebody's music and I'm like, okay, it's like a 3 minute song, it's really cool, but I need to cut I only have a minute to play with. I'm like, is this gonna piss you guys off?
Oh my God, this is such a good thing that you brought up because I can't tell you how many people come to me and they're tentative about this and they're worried about it.
What's your
Absolutely,
baby?
the simple answer is no freaking way. I don't care. I don't care.
Okay.
Like because to me, it's about how the music speaks to you. So if 30 seconds of the music just completely resonates with you and you're like, dude,
Mhm.
this is it. This is what I want to
Mhm.
to start
Okay,
my thing
cool.
off with. Because I with Only Teeth Remains, there's one section of the song that just
Mhm.
hammers away that you're like, yes, that's the intro to Fandeller, right? You
Oh,
know what I mean? Like that's
100%.
that's is it's like this fade in and boom, it just
Oh, it's
hits
so
the
good.
ground running. Like that's it. Like the fact that the rest of it doesn't get that's fine. That's
Cool.
fine. My
Okay,
my
that's a
best
relief.
friend my best friend Tom Seymour, we've done several movies together where he's used music for the score, and
Mhm.
he'll layer some of the tracks together. In fact, another friend of mine, Eric Schrader, he's done the same thing. He literally just did a
Mhm.
movie that used like 80 of my tracks, and he's like, I did this thing where I like layered them and I cut some of them up and I did that. I'm like, dude, that's that's part of an editor. Like that's fine. Just give me credit. I don't care.
Nice.
you know.
Well, and that's a big thing, right? Like, uh, a lot of people do ask, like, "Oh, where do you get your music from?" I'm like, just check the show notes, man. I credit everything.
Yeah.
Like the only times, like, I even credit the stuff I don't have to, right? Like a lot of, like, I buy a lot of licensed music to use from. We had a sponsorship for Monument Studios for a while,
Yeah.
and Dark Fantasy Studio. I bought a bunch of their packs on Humble Bundle back in the day.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I don't have to source them, but I
Right.
do because I'm a historian. I kind of have to.
Right. And if somebody else is watching your videos with the anticipation or the desire to
Mhm.
do what you do, uh, good to know where the resources are, right? And the resources
Mhm.
that sonically make the whole thing sound the way that you want it. And I've always been,
100%.
since I've gotten super serious about producing and releasing music and making it available, I've been very humbled by the fact that, like, look, I know I'm not the only resource, and I'll never be the only resource for you or anybody else out there
Mhm.
that uses my stuff. And I'm actually excited about that because when I come out with something new,
Mhm.
it's another chance for you or other creators to revisit my catalog because you're like, oh,
Mhm.
you're continuing to grow, you're continuing to make music, grow as a musician, and that just that's the way I touch on all the different genres is simply based on the fact that if I kept doing orchestral or D&D
Mhm.
style stuff all the time, like I just start
Mhm.
writing the same song all the time, right? Like
Fair.
I would come back to it because that's kind of what you like. It's in your DNA, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
I I spanned off to a Roaring Twenties where I actually had samples from royalty free or public domain songs
Mhm.
from the 20s, and I made like club tunes out of them and just
That's really. I think I've
played
seen
a
that. Is that's on your site, right?
yeah, the Roaring Twenties album.
Yeah.
It's like 6 or 8 tracks, and they were so much fun, Kelly, to make because it just was reckless abandon. The U.S.
Yeah.
Library of Congress had a website where somebody took the time and took like these old timey tunes and took sample bits out of them where you could just play them on a loop and do different things and you pull down the wave files. I'd put them into a Logic project and then write other music over the top of it and then throw some drum loops in there and stuff. I'm like, this is kind of I'm gonna do another one of these next year. This is kind of cool.
That's really cool.
So, but it's those experiments and then coming back to the orchestration that now I've got this like tangent of this weird other idea that I played around with, and it bleeds into the other styles, and then the other styles have some of their new nuance the next time I go to write it. So I feel like you have to follow your heart when it comes to this stuff.
100%. Yeah.
And
Totally.
and I found that that's a pattern. Sometimes I'll go a couple months without releasing anything. Like right now, I'm like a 1 month hiatus. You know, which around Christmas, I was like, I'm putting it out, man.
Well, yeah, because you very generously offered to do a bunch of stuff for one of our new campaigns, and then like I noticed that both of us around Christmas time were just like, hey, take as much time off as you need. I'm gonna go sleep. I'm gonna have a chocolate coma for a bit.
Yeah.
Bye. Because you need to recharge, and it's weird, right? Because we're doing what we love for a living, so it feels like we shouldn't be allowed to get tired.
Yeah,
And
like
there's
people
weird
expect it.
guilt.
People are counting on us, right? Like you've got content that people are counting on. People are expecting me to keep producing music because they're excited about it. I release 20 albums a year. Who the hell releases 20 albums of music a year?
So last year, if you include our charity games, we filmed more than 200 episodes in 2024. And we had tons of cancellations. We had probably like 30 games that ended up being canceled because of illness or babies or so. Yeah.
Wow.
That's
you're
why
averaging 4 a week.
Yeah. Or more some weeks. Yeah. I actually started so this year, one of the big things that I'm doing is trying to step back because it was affecting my health.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Really?
Yeah, right. It apparently I used to be like, I was getting real fit right before the pandemic. I was going to the gym like 9 times a week, like sometimes twice in a day.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the inside of a gym in 6 months, and you can really tell. Like, I walking my dog wins me sometimes now. If he decides to go up a hill, like, I can get your ass out of the chair, Kelly. But
maybe you and I can motivate each other because I did the same thing. I did the same thing like 6 months into last year, where 2019 I had a PR for a half marathon. I did it in 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Holy crap.
And
I could walk a mile in 2 hours and 5 minutes.
I'm sure you could do better than that.
Is that a full marathon?
No, half.
Okay.
So
still really impressive. I don't know marathons. I'm gonna say
it's 13 miles. I know you guys are the metric system. I know
I'm American. Come on, it's fine. Okay. It's fine. I had to get a new car recently because my Kia Soul, let's just say I sold my soul because it was dying. And my partner's so mad because I have all of the internal stuff because you can set all the digital stuff. It's all set to Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
She's so mad. She's like, I don't even know what this is. What is 73? And I'm like, it's warmer than 72.
Yeah. I know there's a math equation you can do. It's some crazy math. All I know is negative 40 degrees is the same centigrade in Fahrenheit.
And I think, yeah, and 100 is the same. No, not 100. Negative 40 is the same, and
maybe 20 or somewhere.
Something like that. No, 20 is pretty warm, actually. It's weird.
Yeah, 20's, yeah, that's right.
All I know is that I don't want to be anywhere that's too north of 30.
Right.
30 is like 89.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like anything north of that, if you're in the 40s, just leave. Because that's like 105, 110.
Yeah, you're talking Arizona, and
But it's a dry heat.
Yeah. That's a dry heat is an oven, and that'll kill you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well,
I'm not interested in that.
Have you looked at the people in Arizona? They look like jerky.
So does the land, for that matter.
Oh my god.
So what would you give advice-wise to somebody that's aspiring to that? Clearly, there's people that watch you that aspire to do this and become that. What kind of advice would you give them about it? You've clearly been doing this to start their own
games, or
to stream gaming, to start their own D&D campaign, or even if it's just for themselves.
Man, for yourselves, just look through all the options. Find a game that speaks to you. Like if you like Star Wars, there's a Star Wars game. You don't have to play D&D to play Star Wars. Like you can go get the Star Wars Fantasy Flight game's really good, actually. The dice are ridiculously expensive because they use their own special dice for that one. But
okay, man, it's not the standard
You,
deviation of like 4
the
and
D
6 and the
yeah,
D&D ones.
you can use those, but you have to use like a key to figure out what numbers are which. So they make most of their money by special printing dice that have weird like Star Wars symbols on them.
Ah, okay.
And but it's actually, if you can afford the dice or if you can make your own, like it's super worth it. It's a really cool game. But like I would run something that you want to run. Like D&D keeps trying to fill all of these bases. They recently last year put out a book of heists. There are better games to run heists. Blades in the Dark, for example,
Okay.
is a fantastic heist game where it's got all sorts of mechanics for like flashbacks to like the prep period and the
Right.
I know a guy, dun, 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 the Ocean's 11 style stuff. So
Oh,
finding a
so
game
they're
that
not one
speaks,
shots, they're longer campaigns.
you can
They're
do either.
oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you absolutely can. I mean, hell, remember the TV show Leverage? It has a role playing game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, that's wild. Now, I've
you
seen
know.
people do somebody uses my music in a Vampire the Masquerade. Actually multiple. I've because
Oh yeah, I can see that.
I do this thing because it's hard to get feedback, as I
Mhm.
imagine you're aware of. Maybe not at this point with the fan base that you have, but as you're building an audience,
Mhm.
it's hard to get feedback because I mean, like maybe 1% engages with your content if you're lucky, you know,
Yeah.
the 1 out of 100 people that stop by. You're great if you get a thumb up, even more great if you get a comment. So
Yep.
at least once a month, I don't know if I ever told you this before, but at least once a
Hmm.
month, I go out into the interwebs, specifically YouTube, and
Hmm.
just do a search. And then I look for everybody that's given me attribution and uses my music. And I go in and I check out a little bit of their content and I'll comment and like the,
I
the,
was super excited when you commented. I was like, "Holy
yeah.
crap, Tim Kulig like just like commented our video. That's dope as hell."
Yeah. Well, it's a small gesture to show my appreciation and to help the algorithm a little bit in your favor, right? And
Yeah.
and it's I'll tell you, I've had overwhelming success with it. Most like 99% of the people have a very positive response and vibe. And I'll tell you another secret too. I even go in with certain channels, like there's like a French channel that does like Reiki or meditation stuff. I'll
Oh
go into
yeah.
Google Translate and I'll actually comment in their native language and take the time to do that just to show like, listen,
That's really cool.
I'm not just coming by and you know showing my face here so that people will come to me. I'm like, I'm trying to add value to you. So uh it's been
Hmm.
overwhelmingly good and it
That's really
feels really
sweet.
good and it's a neat behind the scenes marketing ploy that I think it takes a lot of time, but the
Well, it's
value.
connection building too, right? Like
Yeah.
as you get all of these people, like you're building a network.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And plus, like you're providing an amazing service. Like the free tracks that you provide are incredibly, I mean, like anybody who's listening to this podcast knows how useful they are or how good they are. I do think that you should put a feather in your cap as much as we're worth a feather at Dork Tales, that I think you're the single most used artist for opening credits that we have
Okay.
by a margin. I think like Alexander Nakarada has one. You have, I think, three different
Okay.
credits. You've got, trying to think what the
Well,
third one
Alex
is.
is pretty good and a personal friend, so
Alex is really good. No,
yeah.
I love
Yeah.
Alexander Nakarada. He's
Yeah.
he's great. Like it's so much metal. Like
Yeah.
his metal is so good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that
but he's
Norwegian
Norwegian. Who
metal
would have thought?
slash Celtic thing going on. Like he's got the
Man.
oh, it's there's a really good juxtaposition of those two
Hmm.
styles that he does. And I'm like, okay, where's the drop? I'm gonna hear there it is. There it is. There's the Celt coming in, and then or
Yeah.
like it starts with like the Celt, it's like nice and pretty, and then it's like just the guitar drop. I'm like, yes.
And I think it's really cool that you can go to specific artists as a creator like me and go, okay, I've got a new game coming out. I'm gonna check Tim first to see like if there's anything that really grabs me and hits the vibe for this, or like because they're for I think for Vecna Eve of Ruin, one of the ones we're doing has like,
Mhm.
the whole thing is like an ancient undead wizard comes back from the grave. So I was looking at a
Yeah.
bunch of your stuff and I was like, they were like so close, but they weren't quite as dusty feeling. Like
Okay.
Like I was like, okay, I really was thinking of like Eye of Ra and a couple of others were on the short list. And I actually stumbled across something I humble bundled, a guy named Joel Studler.
Okay.
And he had like this really bouncy Harry Potter-ish track, and I was like, oh snap, this is really good.
Yeah.
But it came out of left field. But like I know exactly who I go. I go to you for openings. I go, and if I don't find it through you, I go check Alexander Nakarada. If I need something that fits like usually like an intermission, a
Hmm.
lot of times that's Kevin MacLeod. Kevin
Yeah.
MacLeod's stuff is great, and it's like it can be mild or it can be bombastic. So it's really good for like, I don't want to say this because if he hears this, he might take offense, but it's really good. You can find really good hold music.
Oh God, he wouldn't be offended
Yeah.
by that.
Okay.
Oh, no. No, he's
again, he does do elevator music specifically a lot of times,
yeah.
doesn't he?
There's literally a track called that.
I've used it, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure, for an
Yeah.
elevator scene because they're the funniest
it's,
scenes to run in a tabletop game.
I'm sorry, that's my track.
Is it?
His mine's called elevator music. His is called local forecast, and there's two versions. There's a lo-fi version that
Mm.
sounds like a shitty speaker in an elevator, and then there's
Oh, beautiful.
like a full stereo version. And I don't
Okay,
think
so
the stereo version gets used nearly as much as the one in the elevator, because the one in the elevator is absolutely creating an environment. You know what I mean?
that and you need that. You need
Yeah.
that when you're streaming games. I find like anything you can. So back to the question of what advice do I have?
Yeah.
Do whatever you can do to make yourself stand out. We do music, lighting, costumes, promo videos, trailers. We do immersive art. We our production quality for this type of thing is nuts because we're manic about making sure we bring as much as we can. But if you're just starting out, remember if you're starting out trying to broadcast, and I think you could definitely get behind this, is audio quality is primary.
Yeah. Yeah.
If your picture's a little fuzzy, that's fine. So long as people can hear you, you know?
Right. Right.
And you can also rip that and throw it up on a podcast.
I've also heard that audio quality, they'll give you a little bit of a break on that if the content is there, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you have constant clicks and pops, people are going to get pissed off and move on. But
Mm.
honestly, people will be giving about that and balance and stuff if ultimately they're being entertained, right?
Yep.
Like that's really what it
100%.
comes down to. I've stopped myself from getting tripped up on that only because, again, like I told you before, this is secondary to me, the podcast,
Mhm.
and I do incremental small step improvements on it every show I do. This will be
Of course.
38th, somewhere between the 38th and the 40th show I've done in like a year and a half. And now I'm consistently trying to do it once a week. And the idea behind it is like every show is a small improvement over the first one. Or if it's not, it's an experiment to see, can I use this new technology? Right? Like
Well, and
case in point is this thing, Riverside.fm. I recently went to Podfest in Orlando, which it's the longest running podcaster expo in the world.
Mhm.
It's been going on for 11 years as of this year. A guy local to Tampa is the one that started the whole thing. This gentleman by the name of Chris Kremitzos. And it was literally like a 5-day everything podcasting. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And they brought in guests that are successful, guests that understand marketing, guests that understand, speakers and guests, like a whole expo center with vendors and stuff. And one of them being this Riverside.fm, and it's an online platform that we could do this. I'm not
Mhm.
comfortable enough with it yet to start it, so I figured, well, I'm familiar with Zoom, so I'll do the Zoom interview with you
Wait,
first.
does Riverside remotely records, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
I've used it once actually.
Okay.
I did some voice work on one of our players has a podcast called our Storied Insights.
Okay.
And I did some voice work on that. We used Riverside to do remote recording. And
Yeah.
it was really efficient.
Yeah. They all have incorporated some AI components. So,
Mhm.
and in a good way. So
AI can be ethical if used correctly, as long as you use it as a tool, right? Like, don't use it to steal other people's work, but use it to polish up your own, maybe?
Yeah, and it's more the latter in the sense that
That's totally fine.
you capture the two, and now it's got a timeline and everything's separate. You've got speaker one, speaker two, how many speakers you have, the video components and everything. The AI itself can process the recording that you do and pull out key moments and make short form content with it. So it'll look.
Oh, that's really cool.
So it pulls the transcript out, and based on the words in the transcript, the AI has a way of determining like, oh, this is a key moment. Let me grab this and let me make like a 30-second reel for you, right?
And that's on Riverside that it does that.
Yeah, yeah. And
that's really cool.
I've tested out a couple of them, like by feeding some of the recordings I've done so far, and it's not too bad considering I'm a one-stop shop. You know, I'm a one-guy band right now. Eventually, that's going to evolve. You know,
behind the scenes, I pretty much am. Like, I've got a production team that helps with some heavy lifting from time to time. But
yeah,
I actually was going to bring this up earlier when you were talking about like the joy of working for yourself and all of that. How much of your day is administrative? Because I guarantee it's way more than anybody's expecting.
At least half.
At least half, right?
Yeah.
I woke up at 6:10 today, and our podcast was at 9 my time. I just spent 3 hours photoshopping, making thumbnails, preparing posts, doing all the back end stuff. I haven't sat down on Sunday. I was prepared to I was like, okay, I've got a day off. We're not having a stream today. I took it off for mental health. I just scheduled so that I have today off. I'm going to get writing done because I have a deadline that's way past due for a publisher. I didn't write a single word because every single thing in my life started coming up, and it was like, oh, I got to walk the dog. Then I have to go. There's a problem with our playlists on YouTube doing something weird. And it was just like admin, dog, admin, dog. And it was like 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'm like, I'm exhausted, and I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I've got a broadcast. I'm playing in a show tonight, so then I did that.
God.
And then I went to bed.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. Like, I have task lists, and I've heard pros and cons to all this. Like, I have a daily task list, and some people swear by them. Some people are like, nope, you should have 3 things maximum. When you burn through one of them, you add another one to it, and you constantly have a 3 task list, that kind of thing, and that's it.
Oh, that would be demoralizing to me. I need to see the mark-offs.
Yeah, I need to. Well, that's just it for me too. I need to see, and it's not just keeping busy. It's I made a micro improvement here. I got this thing out of the way that's been pinging at the back of my head. That's usually what I look for. I usually look for the thing that keeps coming up, and in my brain I have a mental checkbox that keeps getting additional checks on it. It's like, okay, you've checked off 5 times you need to go and do X task, and you haven't gotten around to it, and you keep punting it. Why are you punting it? Well, 9 times out of 10, the perception is, oh, it's going to take me all day. And then I have to resolve myself that day to be like, look, okay, so today, that's the only thing on my list. And that's the first and last thing I do, if anything else today. You know what ends up happening most of the time? It takes me less. Oh, dude, it takes me less than a half an hour to do. Yeah. Right? The perception and the story in my head is far more dramatic than the reality. And it was just...
It's the same for me at the beginning of every month. So on my Patreon, I'm only supposed to do this for certain tiers, but I do it for everybody because I love everybody, even if you're in just like the throwing a buck at me. Right. I record your name as a thank you for the end of like our podcast version. But at the beginning of every month, I totally freeze up because I'm like, oh, I got to go through the entire Patreon list. I got to make sure everybody's in there. I got to re-record names. I got to splice. That takes 20 minutes. Yeah. But I get paralyzed by it because I'm like, oh, it's so much work. It's like a half hour.
I wonder if you
splicing it in.
I wonder if you could. This is where I think about like ChatGPT or like agents, that you could program an agent to pierce into your or look at your Patreon and look at all the members and just create a list for you every month and just like click, and then it just like gets all that in there, and then every month you just update it. Save it. Like, it may take you several hours to set that up to begin with, but once it's in place, it would solve like all that extra work. that
That's
you never
fair.
have to do again. You know what I mean?
What I'm really excited by is what you were talking about with clipping short form content, because one of the
Yeah.
things I really want is to have more shorts.
Yeah.
Because I do
Especially
a lot
with
of content.
TikTok, like, you know, like
Is it back? Is it here? I don't know.
it's back in the States.
It's back for like 90
People are
days.
taking phones that have it installed on it, and they're selling them on eBay for like thousands and thousands of dollars. So
Damn.
they're not wiping out the apps on the which I don't understand how this works, because you still have to be registered under your Apple ID to
Yeah.
to have an account with
Mhm.
TikTok, but you can't download TikTok right now. Not in
So
the
it's
States.
I used to back in like the 2010s, I used to have an app on my phone called the Rock Clock, back when the Rock was doing a big push for these things. And
Yeah.
it was an alarm clock that basically had a bunch of sound clips from the Rock being like, "Hey jabroni, time to wake up." You know. I've never uninstalled it, but you can't get it anymore. Like
Oh, no kidding.
I don't even think it works anymore. On because I got it. It was on my Samsung Galaxy One or something like that.
Oh, like it doesn't function on the latest.
I don't know. Let's find.
iterations
I'll
of-
check. I'll see if it works actually, because it's got a bunch of cool sound.
Oh, this would be great to hear.
There's one alarm where it's just a chainsaw to wake you up. I still have the Rock Clock, but I had it forever. But you just can't get it anymore. Oh,
That would
is it
disturb
gone?
the hell out of me.
Oh no, it's gone. It's
Oh,
gone.
no.
It didn't make it over. It was a lot of fun while it lasted though. But I don't know. The whole TikTok thing is wild. That is a long discussion.
Oh yeah, that could be a whole podcast in and of itself.
Oh my god. Just
Do
let
you ever-
let- I go ahead.
Did you ever use music to subtly encourage your players to make a decision one way or another?
100%.
Oh, really?
Nothing works better than like not this exact song, but like the Jeopardy theme or like the Sonic underwater. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
My favorite instance of music, and never disclaimer, never ever do this to a player. So anyway, what I did to a player was back when I was in person running games, back in like at the end of my college career. I was running an end of the world game for Vampire the Masquerade. And one of the things that happens is one of the vampire gods has the ability to, he's basically like a god of insanity at
Okay.
this point. And anybody who is part of his bloodline, he eventually can like enter their minds and control them. At the end, it's getting really crazy at the end,
Yeah.
literally. So I used a lot of music in my games, but I had a player who was getting ready to go away for like a backpacking trip for like 3 months. And he was going to leave the game. We were going to run without him, and then he'd come back later. But so I was like, okay, I'm going to have him get taken over by this vampire god, and then come back 3 months later and be like, I don't know what happened. I did some bad things, but it wasn't me. So, if you have ever listened to, and I know you have, I believe it's Hans Zimmer's score from The Dark Knight.
Yes.
And there's
Very,
that
very
one
good
track. There's the one track, the Joker's theme that he played. It was, I believe he was playing a violin with a razor blade, is how he got it. So I isolated that. I think it was an F sharp. I isolated that on a loop. And I put it on a permanent loop, and I put a speaker behind the player's head. And I started it at 1% volume, and throughout the game, as this presence was growing, I slowly would just turn the volume up until it was like this high-pitched.
Yeah.
And by the end, the player had a twitch. It was great. And it was just behind them, and he's like, "Why is there a speaker right by?" And she's like, "Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
fine.
You'll be
But,
fine.
like, you'll be fine. You'll be fine." It really helped the role play. Really did.
For sure. I can only imagine. That's a fantastic example of how
It's basically waterboarding your players, though. Don't.
Well, listen, they agreed to the campaign, and they agreed to the abuse they could potentially get in
This is
doing
true.
so. So
Consent is key. If they consent to it, then it's it's fun. Yeah. Besides that, I think that you get a lot of mileage out of downtime scenes, romantic scenes, things like that, where you put some music in the background to really, I mean, it's mood, right? Like it's a mood multiplier, and the right music can really do that. And don't use the same music every time.
yeah, it's
You know,
I mean, Granted, I get the idea of establishing things, right? If it's one campaign, you've got an establishing piece that brings you into the whole thing.
Of
But
course, and you can use
but
certain tracks as leitmotifs
yeah,
to like set tone. Like totally. Like this is the theme for romance for this campaign.
yeah.
Very cool.
Well, I think about Hans Zimmer. You bring up Hans Zimmer earlier, but I think about um, Inception. And
Mhm.
if you really study that movie and the sonic background he creates in that movie, it's basically all one song. So,
Yeah.
and if you don't get if you don't hear what I'm getting at, go back and watch it
Mm.
again. The
Yeah. Dun, 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 dun.
there's interludes that play off the four chords of the main theme. The four chords, the main theme is
Mhm.
simplified. It's the ramped up version. There's a couple other in between, and then there's motifs or pieces from that are used as like pad pieces that I
Mhm.
call pad pieces because they're like they don't have the high end or low end orchestration things happening.
Mm.
It's kind of just soft and a subtle suggestion of the other song that you're familiar with.
Well,
And it's that familiarity coming back
yeah.
is part and parcel to the whole story anyway, because you're going into somebody's brain and you're having these like dream within the
Mhm.
dream. It's this weird, like multi-layered experience. And I think it was just genius. It was either a really
Oh,
good
100%.
accident or genius composing
No,
or a little
that
bit of
was
both.
planned. He's an amazing composer.
Yeah.
You bring up the padding though. If you're using music for your games, use padding as well. Like, don't always have everything be like an 8 or a 9 or a 10.
Yeah.
Like, you need some downtime for your
Yeah.
players. Like some subtle background vibes are really really useful.
Yeah. Like a bard in a tavern lightly strumming on something and it's so subtle in the background that you don't even hear the notes. It's just kind of
Mhm.
it's a vibe, but nothing more than a vibe. Once it cuts through the
Yeah.
mix and it's interrupting your narrative that you're
Mm.
establishing, I call it like the auditory establishing shot that a DM does.
Yeah.
All right, you walk into a tavern, blah blah, blah ding, 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 like all of a sudden there's like this thing going in the back. That's
Yeah.
fighting you, right? Like no.
Yeah.
The narrative is telling the story. That's supposed to accompany it, not
Mhm.
blast you into another place, right?
Yeah, it's
So
set dressing.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and music does such a great job. Like it's so good at helping ground people. I can't wait because we're running also Descent into Avernus, which is a pre-written module where you end up in hell halfway
oh,
through and then you have to fight your way out, right?
is it
And
like a Dante's Inferno type of thing, or is it like a
kind of
okay,
yeah, so you get sucked into hell and then you have to try to you have to encounter, I'm not sure how much is a spoiler because I was going to run it originally, so I've skimmed it. But you have to go contend with a fallen angel at one
okay,
point to hopefully save the day and rescue a city that's been sucked into hell
oh
by
boy,
evil forces. So it's pretty cool, but I can't wait because once we get in there, we're switching from D&D music to heavy metal for everything
ooh,
because it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so good. And I know you've got some twisted metal style tracks that you've done that
yeah.
I've already grabbed, and I'm like, what can I do with these?
Yeah, and that's actually on the agenda coming. When's that one start? Actually,
It's
when
it's already it's in motion right now. I don't think we're gonna
okay,
be in hell for like a few months still.
okay.
So like we're
'Cause I
still
have
we're
a
still solidly just fighting cultists. Actually, we have a game
I'm
tonight. So okay.
okay. I'm trying to time things properly. I know that if I don't get stuff timely,
Mhm.
you may in some of those cases need to make alternative choices, and I'm
Mhm.
fine with that because I also don't want to force creativity and give you a substandard product either.
Yeah,
So,
well, and sometimes like you hooked me up with a bunch of tracks for the main creative thing I'm doing right now is a series called Cold Iron,
mhm.
which is it's a D&D game, but it's a Western. It's set in our homebrew world. It's got a bunch of mechanics to make it more Western vibed, like gunslingers and stuff like that. And you and I were working on a lot of stuff back and forth for like what type of vibe it was, but it's a really weird setting because
Mhm.
it's like it's Western, but it's also like techno fantasy in
A
many
little
ways.
sci-fi-ish, right?
And
Yeah.
it's got some Eastern influences in it too.
Yeah.
So, but you provided me with some tracks are just some one of your actually I stole another name from you because you provided me a track named Camp Nowhere. And that became like a grounding plot point that there was this excavation camp, this mining camp in the north named Camp Nowhere that vanished,
Oh, that's cool.
and
So I
nobody
inspired you to.
knows.
Oh, that's awesome.
So like I was like, oh, that's a damn good name. Okay, cool. I'm gonna naming stuff is the hardest thing for me. So when I see a good name, I'm just like mine.
Yeah.
I
Naming
use
naming standards
yeah.
is a problem across the board for a high
Mm.
volume composer. I've talked to Kevin about that.
Well, that's why
He
you have so many tracks that are punny.
like I can't help it because I'm like, well, this one this is kind of what this feels like to me, and we'll see. Maybe that'll and part of that too is it's not I try not to make that clickbait. I try to deliver on whatever that pun is. Like
Mhm.
this is
Yeah.
how I thought of this. And hopefully you do too. If not, then yeah, it doesn't resonate to you like it did to me. But that's another thing. It
Hmm.
has to like I found this out. If I found this out when I was in my teenage years, I'd probably be Hans Zimmer right now. But you have to write for yourself first. You
Yeah.
absolutely have to write it for yourself first. If you the second you try to be um critical role or anything else, right? That's not who you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're Kelly
I
Clark
mean,
and
obviously, like
yeah,
watch
yeah,
them and take inspiration,
you know,
like learn from them. Like, what are
right.
they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Like, and the thing is, just because they're pros doesn't mean they don't do things that are wrong.
Correct, correct.
You
But
know?
I say the same thing about um my music and specifically the stuff
Mm.
that I write and then the song naming content, like the song naming standards that I use. Sometimes I'm at a loss and I just come up with something and it's like, okay, like this, it's a throwaway name. That's fine. Um,
Well,
but
because like you sent me one that was arriving to port, I think is
yeah,
the name of the song.
yeah,
Like, it's not the most inspired like name. It's a
but
damn good track.
it
It's
sounds like it, right?
it does, yeah. And I guess what I used it for? Arriving into port. It's in the
Yeah.
first game. It's like a major background theme of
I,
them like showing up, and I'm like, this is perfect.
I
And
wonder how much of that is subconscious. Like I've literally just injected it into your subconscious brain. You're like, yeah, that's a boat pulling into port. Yeah, I'll put it in that spot. Okay,
well,
let's do
I
that.
mean, when I'm creating, I listen to a lot of music, and I go, okay, what order should the scenes go in? If this was a movie, what order feels the most natural and serves the plot the most?
Hmm.
Um, don't overthink this, folks. If you're doing your own game at home, I mean, sure, if you want to, but like this is me being extra. Um, but like arriving to port was like, okay, that scene needs to happen then. Like, and then I was like, oh, well, maybe I could spend more time with them on the boat arriving to this western area,
Right.
like, and kind of build that. And it kind of helped feed the narrative as I was like, oh, I'm going to use this track, but that means that if I'm going to use this, I want to use it well. So
Yeah.
like, how
Yeah.
am I gonna? And sometimes it really informs what you create, and it's
Yeah.
cool. I love having access to that. That's why I loved you sending me all that music. I was like, oh, this is dope, dope, dope. I have
Well,
no idea how I'm going to use this one.
that's literally where I'm at now is I just finished I had an interview last week with a true crime podcast that uses my
Ooh.
tunes and she's delving into a secondary podcast now that's paranormal in nature. And she was looking
Ooh.
for an intro and I was taking my break time. I say I was taking a break and then she's starting that podcast and I'm like, all right, I'll come up with a couple ideas. I send her the first one and I hit it 100% off the first one because it was she
Okay.
wanted to.
I got two pitches for you. I got two
Okay.
pitches for you for podcasts. So
Yeah.
take some notes. So
All
I've
right.
got a podcast that I recorded with another Kel from my team. It's never been it's everything's still in the can, hasn't been edited, but it's called The Essential Killer. And the
Okay.
idea is it's a true crime podcast where we're coming at it. She's a criminologist, I'm a writer, and I'm like, let's build the best fake serial killer. Like what is required to build the best like biggest hype, but still could be possible. Like, we get a Hannibal Lecter? Could that happen in real life? Let's build a killer
Okay.
out of this.
So it's
So
all
it's a,
conceptual. It's not real
yeah, it's
life
all conceptual.
stories. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then we create real life stories around it. Well, real life. We create the fictional universe around the character. It's kind of cool. The other podcast, I have a D&D podcast that we're starting up soon called This Podcast is a Mimic.
As in
Mimic
the
as
case
in
that
the treasure chest
yeah,
that eat
yeah.
people. So if you have like a 10 or 15-second idea for that, send it over, man. I need an opening track. We're gonna
All
start
right.
recording that this month. or next month, not this month. It's almost the end of this month.
Absolutely. And here's the thing I would encourage you to do. Uh, you are welcome to do this up until this point, but now you have my undivided like attention and permission to do so. If
Please.
if you need something, say something. Just ping me. And if I haven't followed through on something, it's probably because I have like a half a dozen to a dozen requests. But I'm starting to do this thing this year where I'm taking the folks that I'm creating this with, the creating these collaborations with, and specifically right to that need. So I want to make sure that I'm consistent with that, and I implore you to call me on it, especially like we're doing the cold iron thing. I've got that stuff in the works.
Yep.
I actually have a couple ideas I jotted down the last week, even though I said I was taking a month off. I'm like, well, I got this new software, VST. I'm going to try that out a little bit and play around with it. I'm like, woo! I'm like,
If
oh,
you,
Kelly's going to like this when it's done. I'm like, all right.
I could send you a couple of songs because I've got a track I'm using for the Man in Black character, like if you know the Dark Tower, you know the vibe. But I've got like a creepy the cold iron of cold iron is both like the gun, it's a cold iron, right? But also it's this strange like evil material that people are finding, this ore that mutates people. So some violins on that would be pretty cool. Some nonstop violins.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. But like I'll reach out to you and be like, hey, can you give me like an ambient track that's just like 10 seconds of loopable or something?
Yeah. I mean, one of the best things that I mean, sometimes people will give me a sample, and I don't like to rip off other people. Like that's a big no-no in my book. But it gives me an idea of the vibe. So I've been less weird about that as I've aged into my composition years. It's like, oh, okay, somebody doesn't know exactly how to tell me what they want, so they'll send me that. And you've been great about that by
I try to send you like tons of stuff. I remember I was on vacation, I was just like spamming you with links from my hotel room. I'm like, crap, how about this one, because like I was like, I'm not communicating, I don't have any background in music. I couldn't tell you the difference between a treble clef and a bass clef, like by memory probably. So
that's usually why I jump on calls too, because I could sit back. Like today we have a different agenda. We're talking about each other's content and creativity and everything else. But there's times where I'll literally be like, look, let's get on a Zoom call or whatever for a half an hour. Tell me what you're doing and give me an idea of the vibe and what's happening. And the more I talk it out with somebody, the more I can pull from them what the feeling should be that's evoked. And pretty much like 80 to 90% of the time, I can get you a track that sounds like what you're looking for. But like once I start suggesting instrumentation and overall mood, I'm like, okay, I can hear that in my head. Let's send you 2 or 3 sample tracks, and usually one or what happens sometimes I'll send 3 and they're like, God, I love all of them. I'm like, go ahead and use them all then. I don't care.
6, I think last email. It was pretty great. Okay, question for you. Who is your because you're talking about that, I've got a specific song playing in my head, but who's your favorite movie composer?
It'll definitely be Hans Zimmer. Prior to him, however, I spent a lot of time studying Danny Elfman because
Danny Elfman, yeah.
I enjoyed, and if I'm being honest with myself, he was a lot more recognizable in the beginning because he has especially like the Edward Scissorhands to Beetlejuice to maybe Benny. No, he didn't do. Did he do Benny and June? I
don't know. I never saw Benny and June.
The earlier stuff, like into the mid to late 90s for Christmas, and was starting to do other things. His compositions evolved to a point where I'm like, oh, it's Danny Elfman. I'm like, oh, that sounds different. Okay, there's that, and I feel like he grew as a composer, and now when I go back and I don't recognize it, I'm like, there's something else that you learned along the way, and you're bringing something else to the table now,
What's your favorite era of Danny Elfman? Is it current or like when?
let's see what he did a Spider-Man.
He did Spider-Man. I was going to say Spider-Man
Yeah,
1 and 2.
yeah, and
Probably
I was
five.
pretty amazed at that score. I was like, wow, because first of all,
Mm.
it has its thing. It does have some of his DNA in it, but it definitely shows him evolved as a
It,
composer.
it feels insectoid. It feels spider-like. When you listen to
Yeah,
the it feels like legs.
yeah.
And it's so cool. I am not a composer. I am not a music guy, but I am obsessed and have been since I was a kid with I'm not sure, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's either Basil or Basil Polidorus,
Okay. What
from
remind me?
Conan specifically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
Conan, Starship Troopers, RoboCop,
Oh, yeah,
but like
yeah,
huge drums, a lot of choirs. Oh my God.
yeah.
I'm obsessed. I always am. But it's going and talking to somebody and being like, "Hey, can you throw together a track with me with a choir?" They're like, "No, we're not. No, like it's not happening." Like, um, we had an opening theme commissioned. So we commissioned an opening theme for our homebrew games last year.
Okay.
And when we were talking about it with the group off the beaten path, we were kind of bouncing back and forth ideas, and I was like, "Well, what about this? What about this?" And they're like, "What you're looking at is like a $5,000 song," and I'm like, "Okay, we'll ease off that
Yeah, right.
because I have to buy food this month
Yeah,
and for
right.
the rest of the year." Um,
Because
but
I think about really unique orchestrations, and
mhm,
me and my buddy Tom always go back to Jerry Goldsmith
yep.
and um what was it? Why am I drawing a blank on it? It's Total Recall, the original one
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
with
yeah,
Arnold
yeah.
Schwarzenegger, and this is
Yes.
that's Total Recall before Total Recall was orchestrating before keyboards were a standard in that.
Mhm.
So he had this thing where he used the woodwind instrument section and the flutes and everything to create that airy, flighty, you're in space feeling. And it just was, it was like just a gorgeous way, like to just make you feel like you're on Mars and you're somewhere else. I felt like it was otherworldly using traditional instrumentation, and honestly, it's
I'm
really
listening to it
cool.
right now.
Are you? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a
It
flute?
yeah, yeah. There's that. I mean, there are keys in there. There are keys mixed
No,
into.
not what I'm listening to though. It's the
No, yeah,
that's a holy crap.
yeah, yeah. They did. He did a hell of a job before that technology was available, pretty widespread. And I always had appreciation for people that can make things sound otherworldly when they only had limitations on the things that they could use to make something sonically. You know?
Man, it's I love when people do magic tricks. Like, and
Hmm.
that's basically like what especially I mean, I guess everybody who is works in the creative field at all, like it's all magic tricks. It's all
Yeah.
smoke and mirrors. Like it's the nobody's wearing pants underneath the camera lens, right? Like and I absolutely love that because we have so many people ask, well, what do you do for asking about makeup stuff for characters? And it's like, well, you you don't or asking costume details. Like, what does the back of the costume look like? It looks like safety pins.
Yeah.
Like, why would I like, if I'm facing
Yeah.
forward, why would I do the back?
Yeah,
That's an
there's
extra
nothing to
20
focus
hours,
on back here, right? As
you
long as
know?
the front face is doing the thing, that
And yeah. And it's like, oh wow, you guys like, yeah, well, contour your jawline if you have an exposed or grow a beard if you're a guy. Great
yeah,
way to look good on camera. Grow a
right.
beard, right?
Yeah, I've been rocking this for like 25 years. I think my daughter and ex would
You'd be
look at me and be like, "Who
unrecognizable,
the hell
right?
are you?" You know?
Dude, whenever I shave, people get so mad at me. Like this is a business beard. Like I have to keep this beard because my audience expects me to be DM daddy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I shave it for charity sometimes when people freak out. And I'm like, thanks. I kind of like my face, but okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Give me 2 weeks, I'll be back to what you wanted, okay?
Exactly, right? I'll be stubbly for a week and then like let me just angle the camera down a little more so I have a chin.
All
Um,
right. So what do you think between what do you think and what are your plans for like the next 5 to 10 years? with Dork Tales? Do you have a long-term strategy as far as how the channel's going to grow? I know that you had a repivot around the holidays and the New Year because of
Yeah.
sicknesses you experienced last year and everything, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa! I got to temper my schedule. Everybody wants all this stuff, and I have only so much bandwidth. So, tell me a little bit about what is in the future for Dork Tales.
So right now, what I'm doing, I mean, I'm still running. My goal is going to it sounds so ridiculous when it's coming out of my mouth and I'm not the only one in the room. I'm trying to get down to running only 3 or 4 days a week, only 3 or 4
Hmm.
live shows a week.
Yep.
Ideally, I would not be the one running one of those. I would just be either playing or doing tech for it. Um, and then I get 3 days off. Oh, off. I mean, I don't have like 3 days on the beach. That's like 3 days of doing administrative work. Maybe one day I actually take off. That
Right.
would be nice.
Right.
Big day, one day a week that I could take off. I think that my home life would be a lot nicer.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of pressure on your relationships, right? Um, being busy all the time. But beyond this, it's kind of weird because in the D&D space and the tabletop gaming space, we're seeing a lot of changes in the flow of tabletop games and what people want out of them and
Mm.
what the audiences want. So right now we saw during the pandemic there was a real skyrocketing of viewership because people didn't have anything to do. But
Right.
now with the economy as it is, people working more, people stressed about money, like things are starting to really level off. And I'm not sure where the growth opportunity is beyond what we're currently doing. So I'm looking at ways to grow in related fields. Like we're going to be starting to do a bunch of side projects, like the podcast I mentioned.
Hmm.
This podcast is a mimic. There's going to be a series of how-to videos I've been threatening to do for like 2 years because people want to know how to do things, and I want to pass on what meager advice I have and hope that it helps people. And it's
Yeah.
also good content. I want to get more into writing and developing because it's something I'm passionate about, but it does take a ton of time.
Yeah.
And I also have to look down the line and see what's going to happen in like I think that Dork Tales is going to be around doing stuff no matter what. Even if in a couple years lifestyle changes mean that it has to be cut back.
Yeah.
Uh, it's I I would like to make this sustainable as a primary income, but I'm gonna have kids in a couple years.
Right.
I need time to spend with them. I need something stable, and if this can't be that, then it's going to be a hobby. But
Right.
we have such a wonderful community. I'll never give it up.
Yeah, that's an
Um,
interesting thing about in addition to the music stuff, I know you
mm,
probably know this and my audience does, but if you don't know this, I also help produce movies.
yeah.
So I've done documentaries, narratives, that kind of thing. And the primary person I do it was my best friend Tom Seymour. He
Mm,
uh he has a 5-year-old. So 5 years ago, the whole game changed, right?
yeah.
Doing things on site, it changed for two reasons. It changed because his life changed by having a daughter, and also the
Mhm,
pandemic. So a lot of the productions that we did had to get pivoted into a way that we could do a bunch of stuff remotely, remote interviews,
mhm,
archival footage, that kind of thing, but also tell a compelling and interesting narrative about whatever the subject matter is that we're dealing with, and get people to be interested in it, like it, and get some awards and some film festivals, which we've managed to do. So
that's awesome.
it literally just, as long as you're not rigid, Kelly, about
Yeah.
how things are supposed to be, I think as those points in your life evolve, you're going to find a way and a path to keep doing the thing that you love and integrate it into the things that are new and you feel excited about, but like push
I
out
hope
that
so.
extra time, right? So,
Mm,
it basically comes down to how much do you love it and how much do you want it to be a permanent part of your life? And I think you can manage it, and you're really good
I
at it. It would be a shame if
thank
you
you.
if you gave it up. I would be
I
I'd
don't
be
think I don't
very
think I
sad.
could. I don't think I could. I think the longest I ever took off from it, I took a year off. Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
take a year off. I took about 6 months off. But even then, I had to assemble a group when I was teaching overseas. Like I had to, I don't know. One of the things I really love about it is that because of the ease of doing online play, it's it doesn't matter where anybody is. I've got friends who are moving like halfway across the province in the next couple months who are members of Dork Tales, and
Yeah.
they're able to do that move because they feel empowered that they're not losing their friends, they're not losing their community. They're still
Mm.
going to be able to be on Wednesday night shows or something like that. And because so much of our interactions are online, it's very freeing.
Yeah.
You can really work around people's schedules. And yeah, I mean, things are going to get more complicated. But I mean, they always do. I appreciate
Yeah.
the advice. Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to give it up. I'm addicted to it.
Yeah. I
But
can't imagine you doing so.
besides, I need to trick people into buying my book somehow, right? Like buy my book.
And if you're developing all this homebrew content, are the books homebrew content? Is that ultimately what it is, or is it stories around the universe of, or some
Um,
combination therein?
both and other. Like I've got a couple of novel ideas in the works
Hmm.
that I'm hoping to start breaking ground on pretty soon. A lot of stuff is very topical, so I want to like strike while the iron's hot. Um, I used to want to get into production and script writing,
Mm,
because I've got a degree in screenwriting, right? So I
right.
was gonna go into that, and then it's just such a hard industry to break into.
Yeah.
It's it's really a you luck out or people. And
Right.
unfortunately, I did not have the money to get lucky because
Yeah.
it does require like moving down to LA or really building your networks. I mean, you
Yeah.
work in
Yeah. Yeah.
film
I
stuff.
mean, we've discovered that with independent film. Like, I don't think at this point I would choose any other direction. The fact that we
Mhm.
make independent films, push them through the film festival circuit, we've garnered a bunch of notoriety from there. But I
Mhm.
don't, it would have to be a special arrangement and collaboration for me to force my hand into like the LA environment because I know most of that has a really big, price tag agenda. We could talk forever. We could do a
Oh
whole
yeah, you're
podcast on the current film industry standards and what it takes to have a film that's profitable. You know, I,
well, and there's so much interference. There's so much like any. It's really sad. Like looking because I'm a huge comic guy, but looking at some of the most recent Marvel movies, like, did you see Ant-Man 3?
wasn't a fan. Was not a fan.
It was hacked together in the editing room
Yeah,
so badly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you could tell it had a completely different ending. Like characters are teleporting across the screen. Like they're
Hmm.
breaking the three-fourths rule. They're like, what is going on with that
Yeah.
movie?
The trouble is that what ended up happening, and this is something I heard about the MCU as well
Hmm.
as the Star Wars universe. The problem is that when you talk about a multiverse and you're trying to strike gold a second time with another Avengers arc, right?
Yeah,
And what they're doing with this multiverse thing is they're like, okay, every piece of content you have to watch because they tie into each other, and that'll keep
yeah.
people engaged with the brand. Well, now you're not focused on good storytelling. You're focused on how to bridge this piece to the next one, and it may
Hmm.
not make any freaking sense to do what you're
Well, and
doing. You know what I mean?
then there was also the problem that when Disney Plus launched, the CEO before Bob Iger came back, I think it was Bob
Hmm.
Iger right now.
Yes. Yes.
The CEO before him forced the green lighting of a bunch of shows that weren't ready.
Right.
Like they flooded it, and that's why you got a bunch of really lackluster shows where, like, after they started cutting back, ironically, Agatha All Along, the one that came out of nowhere, and you're like, why is this a show? Is
Yeah.
one of the best things they've ever done.
No
It,
kidding. No
it's
kidding. I'd
really it's
skip right past that. I'm like, why do I care? You know?
give it a watch. It's
Okay.
they have so much fun with it, and even the stuff, it's really great because as you're watching it, there are even some moments in it where you're like, this looks like the production quality of this looks really low. It's part of the story. You just
Yeah.
don't realize it for
Ah.
quite a while. And it's such a hit.
Mm.
And I really hope that they can get their footing back again. Captain America opens like right around my birthday, and I'm like,
Yeah.
please be okay. I want
Yeah.
Harrison Ford as the Hulk to be fun, you know?
Yeah. He is 80 something now. I mean, one could say I mean, I saw the Dial of Destiny, and I was not impressed. It was it made him look like a sad, withered adventure person, and I just didn't care very much for it. Not sure if that was your takeaway, but uh, it was unfortunate. It felt
I
unfortunate to me. It was
I
better than
like
Crystal
Mangold's
Skulls.
work. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it was the there's only one fourth Indiana Jones movie, and it's the one that just came out.
Yeah.
Uh or maybe it's the game that just came out. I don't know. Dial of Destiny was weird because I mean for a lot of reasons. I liked Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character,
Mm.
and I think she got a lot of undue hate for that character because she really was just kind of playing a Han Solo in an Indiana Jones movie. And that's fine.
Yeah.
I didn't like the third act stuff. Like at the very end, I thought that it was very I didn't like what they did. It was a little too much for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that bugged me was the CG young Harrison Ford stuff was pretty cool. They've come so far with that, but he didn't sound like himself. He sounded like an old man because your voice
Right.
changes.
Right.
And
Right.
and they should have used body doubles more often because there's a scene where young Harrison Ford is climbing up a hill after coming out of a lake or a river or something after he jumps off the train.
Hmm.
He's walking up the hill like an 80-year-old man.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah. I
was
mean,
just you should have used a body double for that scene if he looks that rigid. Like
and they had a lot of reshoots on that, by the way.
I bet.
Multiple. I think the first one or two passes that were screened did not perform well. The same thing is being said about
Hmm.
this Captain America thing,
Oh
but
man,
my
it's
fingers
the
are
shortest one.
my fingers are crossed that they pull that out, you know. But
I
I still support it. Screw it.
I'll go see it. I'll go see the ones I want to see, and I I don't know. I really want good superhero movies. I love good I'm really excited for what James Gunn's doing.
Mm.
I made the mistake on Facebook by being on Facebook. That was my first mistake. But I made the mistake of liking some Henry Cavill Superman posts a few years ago
Hmm.
because I love Henry Cavill. He's
Yeah.
great. Uh Now all I have is a bunch of Zack Snyder, like the toxic fan culture side of the Zack Snyder verse, posting on my timeline constantly about how bad the new movie looks. And I'm like, the new movie looks actually really good. Like it
Mm.
looks like it's full of hope. I don't think David Corenswet looks as much like Superman as, Henry Cavill or
Yeah.
Brandon Routh or any of that. But I'm gonna give him a chance.
Yeah.
Like, and Crypto, people were ripping Crypto to shreds because he was the wrong type of dog, that he wasn't our kind of Crypto, which is like this snarling mutt. It's like, dude, he's
Yeah.
the super dog. Like, just chill. Like,
Yeah.
also, don't hate on a dog. People were hating on the poster of him on the moon with his arm around Crypto. And I'm like, if you're hating on a picture of a guy with his dog, you're a jerk.
I mean,
Like,
also you got to remember this too. Super, super important.
super.
This is for kids. First and foremost. These are comic books. They're for kids. Like
Yeah.
if you give it a pedestal that it should have the I don't know, the background and the intelligence and the headiness of a 50-year-old man that's read like Noam Chomsky and like all these different philosophers and freaking Khalil Gibran and like no, it's a freaking action movie with superheroes.
Yep.
Enjoy yourself, right?
I
Like
mean, that's wonderful subtext. That's wonderful things to work into it in the background and to
yeah,
weave into it subtly. Just have fun. Have
yeah,
fun. Just
yeah.
go be
Remember that
inspired
part, you know?
and go be inspired to be a better person. Like that's
Yeah,
what Superman's about. All of these posts that I'm seeing are all like, "Oh, I wanted to see the fight with Black Adam." I don't care about a fight of two invincible guys punching each other. That's
yeah.
boring. I want to see
It's
someone
raw.
actually.
Next movie. You
I
know?
mean, that's what it would have been because of Dwayne's contract, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Because
He can't lose.
he can't lose. You count his punches. It's so boring.
That is
I
so
love
weird.
old I love old movies, like old action movies where the protagonist gets just bodied and still wins.
Yeah.
Those are the best. Like Harrison Ford in every movie he's ever been in gets his ass kicked
Yeah.
constantly.
Yeah. I
He's
mean,
always got that bloody little, or
Christopher
Rocky.
Reeves. Christopher
Oh,
Reeves
yeah.
got his tail kicked in pretty much every Superman movie at some point, or
I
he
mean,
was down in
even
the dumps, you know?
yeah.
Like,
I mean, even Schwarzenegger in a lot of these movies is getting totaled.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
You're not going to surpass Arnold, Dwayne. I'm sorry. Like,
No. No. I mean there's no surpassing Arnold, you know, late 70s, mid to late 80s. I mean that he was a
yeah,
monster back then and
he was
he's
amazing.
I mean steroids will do that, but you know.
I mean,
But he also had to do the workouts, you know.
he did. I
Holy.
mean, he put in the hours, and then
Yeah.
like the steroids he was taking back then. I'm pretty sure most of them were legal at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Like
he
at
had a
least
major heart surgery in his 50s or 60s, I think, and I'm sure it
he
was a
did.
direct result of years
Uh,
of.
Potentially, apparently, that was congenital.
Oh,
It was
okay.
congenital valve disorder, but it could have been exacerbated by. Sorry, I'm a Schwarzenegger fanboy, so
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
read his
yeah.
book. I haven't read Be Useful yet, though. My mom got it for me for Christmas. I hope that wasn't her telling me something.
Ah,
Um, she's very supportive of my weird lifestyle, though. So
that's great.
yeah,
That's great. So let's finish it off with
yeah.
just telling us what's next for, you know, what should we expect this year, and
Boy,
some of the campaigns you got going on. Just give me, you know, where we can find everything so my audience knows. I'll include it in the show notes, obviously, but you know,
okay.
just give yourself the plug, man. Let's do it.
Hey, folks, if you want action, adventure, and stories that are going to speak to your heart and your soul, told by a bunch of good friends, many of which are Canadian, so you know they're nice, check out Dork Tales. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitch. You can find us wherever podcasts are smuggled. We're on pretty much every podcasting app. Just Dork Tales, like Duck Tales, but with dorks. Um, the OU is implied. Right
As
now, we've got a fun
dorktales.ca, dorktales.ca.
dorktales.ca
Okay.
CA for the website.
Okay.
Dorktales.com. Somebody else bought that a few years ago and they want like $4,000 for the domain. And I'm like, it's
Oh,
not
I
worth
hate
it. It's
squatters.
not. They're just squatting on Dorktales. We're not the French webcomic Dorktales. That turns out it exists as well.
Okay.
Uh, so that was a weird one to discover. But right now we've got a number of things. We've got tons of back catalog if you're looking to get into our previous games. The ones that I would strongly suggest you take a look at, because we've got so many on the fly right now. If you like Dungeons and Dragons, or if that's what speaks to you most, that type of fantasy vibe, we have a series that's being slow released called Descent into Avernus. It's a pre-packaged adventure that I actually get to play in. It's ran by my good friend Cal, and
Hmm.
involves a bunch of ne'er-do-wells in the city of Baldur's Gate. Yep, like the game.
Awesome.
And we have to descend into hell and save the world, you know, the usual stuff. Cold Iron is a homebrew, meaning that we created the setting, the world, everything in it game, that's set in a Western style continent about the size of Australia, of five people coming together to hunt down a figure known as the Man in Black that has affected their lives in some horrible way. And they're looking for recompense, revenge, or simply answers. And in the way, they're going to find a world-shattering threat, because it's D&D. The world's always threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that are happening this year, we have an ongoing series called Mage the Ascension, the Victorian Age, which is a game about real world magic users set in the Victorian era. So they're set in the 1890s. We're in the third book of that right now. I call them books instead of seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing my Murder on the Orient Express style story where they're traveling on a fictitious railway from Cairo to Bombay.
Oh,
And
wow.
bad things are about to happen. They just got on the train after many episodes of kicking around Cairo and causing trouble and creating horrible abominations with mad science. It's pretty wonderful. It's an all-female cast. It's costumed. It's super deep and super wonderful. But we've got so many different things. I couldn't tell you where to begin. We have a new series of we're doing a Fallout show based off of the TV series and games coming soon. We've
Oh,
got
sweet.
that 1920s game is coming out. I've got a game that's set in 1999 that's got Mage 99, kind of ripping off X-Men 97, and a bunch more stuff like that. We've got way too many stories. Just pick one, run with it.
Yeah.
There's something for you. I guarantee.
So this is 7 things you just rambled off, and around the turn of the year, it was 6 or 7 things you just rambled off, and around the turn of the year on the Patreon, you're like, I gotta pull things back, blah blah. This is what you're doing for the rest of your life, bro. This is it. This is it.
Hey,
kids are not.
Join the Patreon. Support me.
Kids are not. This is what you need to do because it's clearly your passion, my friend.
I love it.
Great to have you today, man. Thanks so much for being on my podcast, and we'll catch you all next time on the Tim Kulig Free Music Podcast. See you guys.